Hi, I'm Matt Duke from the South Texas Power Lunch, and today's guest is Charles Woodin from Geekdom. If you haven't heard from Geekdom, you don't want to miss this episode. We're going to be talking about all the workshops and programs that Geekdom has that every single person in our community that is working on a startup needs to make sure that they are aware of and probably needs to attend. We're going to talk about ideation, incubation, and all the variety of ways that Geekdom is literally changing San Antonio one startup at a time. Now, one thing you don't want to miss in this, and I don't want to give too much away, is Charles is going to talk about even financial resources where your company could actually compete to earn $25,000 through the community fund if you join this great community that's downtown. Now, we've actually moved our law firm here into Geekdom, and we're super excited because the buzz is all around that changes are happening, and the epicenter of that is Geekdom. Let's go ahead and jump into this podcast. I hope you really enjoy it as much as I did. Charles, thanks so much for coming here to talk here at Geekdom, which we're excited about because this is our first episode here at our new offices at Geekdom, which we absolutely love with the new set and everything.
Made my commute really easy, so I appreciate it.
I think it was 30 feet from your office?
Pretty much,
basically
yeah.
Mine?
No, the only thing I had to avoid was conversations on the way over, but other than that, we were good.
Which, I mean, this is something that is really exciting is Geekdom is, I mean, there is a ton of people here.
Yep.
I mean, the energy, which is why we moved down here. I mean, it's exciting. I mean, the innovation that's going on, the programming that's here, which we're going to talk a bit about in a second here. I mean, it's really special. I mean, we were here during COVID a little bit and like everywhere. I mean, it was kind of dead, but I mean, what you and the team have done here, I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Well, and I love it. You know, we walk outside your door and you never know who you're going to run into. It could be a familiar face. It could be somebody new, but there's always something different happening. And it's one of those things that keeps you energized, but also can distract, but it's great. I love it.
It is. Before we jump into everything about Geekdom, let's talk a little bit about you, because I know about your story, and I know some people know about your story, but you have a fascinating story just on your personal journey that brought you to Geekdom. Can you give us the highlights of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with just kind of where I was born, which, you know, I was born and raised Michigan and, you know, just outside of Flint and Detroit. And
okay, well, hold on, time out. Michigan or Michigan State?
So that's a difficult question for me. I grew up during the time where Michigan was my team. Football, basketball, they were my team. It was also right at the time that the Fab Five had a blowout during the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And so they left contention. And so I had to have a basketball team. And so Michigan State became my basketball team. And so for anybody listening from Michigan, I apologize. You know, I don't want to.
You were literally divided?
I was divided, yeah.
I went to Alabama, and I don't know that you would be able to survive if I said I like Alabama
Auburn,
for football and Auburn for basketball.
Yeah.
My family wouldn't let me survive, I'm sure. So that must be a tough team pick there, buddy.
It was. And I'll tell you that one of the interesting parts is my best friend actually went to college at Michigan State. And so I was at their Tom Izzo's beginning points at Michigan State. So I was right at their kind of coming up period. So it was a great time to have Michigan State. But yeah, I get a lot of guff whenever I talk.
I got no dog in the hunt. And that makes sense to me as a sports guy. But God bless you when you walk across that state line into Michigan. You're a divided man, not a divided house.
100%.
Sorry, I distracted us here. So Michigan boy, where do you go from there?
So born, raised Michigan, spent, you know, pretty much my entire childhood there outside of 2 years, where this is where it got interesting. The 2 years that I spent outside of Michigan, I actually was down in the Rio Grande Valley. This is right after NAFTA was passed.
Okay.
And the factory that my dad had worked for, the company decided that they were going to open up a factory in Reynosa, Mexico. And so they needed to have somebody go down there and start setting up the lines for the factory. And so he was, you know, pegged to be one of those people.
Wow.
Came down, started in Mission, built a house and lived in McAllen for 2 years. And then once the factory was up, running, good to go, it was like, hey, we no longer need you. So, you know, we can go back to Michigan. And so we moved back to Michigan. But for me as a kid, I was probably around 10 to 12 at that time. It was really awesome to experience it because even though I grew up near Flint and Detroit, it was a pretty removed town, small, and being in the Rio Grande Valley was a pretty big culture shock for me. And I think it really helped me kind of see different perspectives and things. But going back to Michigan, you are at the height of some of the downturn in Detroit. You're at the height of some of the downturn in Flint. And, you know, when you're graduating high school, you ask yourself, like, what does my future look like? What am I going to be doing? And for me, I think the one thing that stood out was I don't know what my future is here in this state. And so I decided to join the military. My sister had joined prior to me, and she had been kind of my guide through that and had said, hey, you should join. I thought that I was going to become some kind of a spy. I'd heard this amazing story about being a linguist, Korean linguist. You're going to learn, all this.
You're going to be a Jack
stuff.
Ryan.
Exactly. That's what I had dreamt I was going to be, if not, Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, those types of things.
Gonna jump off some mountains.
Yeah.
On a bike.
Not the case at all. I'll tell you that right now. But yeah, so that was kind of what led me to that. Shortly after I graduated high school, I decided, hey, I'm going to check this out. Joined the military, was able to pass this ridiculous test to find out whether or not you're capable of learning languages, which I'll tell you, taking the test, I thought I failed, but I passed and ended up stepping in and learning Korean, which was grueling in and of itself.
Wow.
But we were in an amazing part of the country. I was in Monterey, California for 2 years, and then graduated from that, and then ended up becoming what we call a flight linguist or a Korean linguist in the air. And so flew on the ugliest airplane in the United States Air Force arsenal. I'll tell you that. And if you ever look it up, it's RC-135, is not beautiful. But flew around in that for about 8 years. Spent some time in Japan where I was deployed for a little bit, but majority of my time was spent in the Middle East. And my role there, obviously being a Korean linguist, was really, my job was to help the people on the ground with intelligence. And it was one of the most rewarding jobs that you could have, because you could feel that the effects, the information you were giving them, were actually having an immediate effect on what they were doing. And I loved it. And during my last deployment, which I want to say was like around 2008, they were saying, well, okay, now you're going to go be an instructor. And I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. I want to keep doing this. Yeah. And they're like, no, this is where we need you. And I was like, okay. So I ended up going to San Angelo, Texas. And surprisingly enough, that time as an instructor was more impactful for me than any other job that I'd had in the past, because it allowed me to work with, relatively young individuals, kids that I was helping transition from what they had thought. Again, going back to, I thought I was going to be Jack Ryan. I'm getting these kids walking in, think they're going to be doing that. And I'm teaching them the true reality of what work looks like in the Air Force. And it was awesome to be a part of that transition. Wow. And I realized something really important at that time, that I'm the type of person who loves being a part of those types of transitions. And I'm also a person who really loves to solve problems. So if you present to me a challenge or a problem, I become obsessed with solving that one thing. And then I feel reward when I accomplish that solution. Right. So plant those seeds. 2010 rolls around. I get out of the military. Where am I going to go now? I remembered back before I joined the military, I had done an engineering job with this engineering company up in Michigan. I was like, I want to be an engineer. So moved down here, complete break from the military, start going to school at UTSA to try to become an engineer. Okay. But I'll tell you that going from an instructor to being a student within a month or so, it's a difficult transition. Sure. And I was like, man, I need a mission. I need a job. I need something. And I luckily stumbled my way into Apple, where I found a pathway there that allowed me to do the things that I loved, which was solving problems. I became part of their business team there. And their business team's job is to work with small to medium-sized businesses. And so we're talking primarily mom and pops, the people you and I are experiencing here. Yep. But then you'd also work with companies the size. Our largest client at the time was Rackspace, believe it or not. Okay. And so you kind of get that breadth of experience and what challenges they're encountering and how technology can help those companies advance. I loved that job. If you and I would have talked in 2017, the day before I walked into this building, I would have told you 100%, there's no way I'm leaving Apple ever. Like, I had seen my pathway forward. I knew what my future looked like. I knew that I had a pathway. But I had a friend of mine, a guy who actually hired me at Apple, who was the COO at Geekdom at the time. Okay. He came to me and he had this kind of reputation at Apple. Whenever he popped in, it was like, oh, he's looking to pull somebody over. He's a poacher. 100%. And so he came, and I happened to be the pick one of the days. Okay. Came in here, and my whole world changed. And what it was that really changed for me was I had a conversation with a mentor of mine, Dax Moreno, who wasn't at the time, first time I met him. And he really shared with me this mission that Graham had kind of had Geekdom be a part of, which is, how do we change, or how do we give an identity to downtown San Antonio for startups, for developers, for, just creation and companies. And it was something that brought me all the way back to where I grew up. And it was like, this is my home now. I have 2 daughters. I want to leave an impact here. I want to help build a city where my daughters, when they go through that same pivotal life change, realize that there is a future here.
Right.
And what can I do to help contribute to that? And then I left that day, again, walking in 100% sure that no matter what option I was given, I was walking out of here saying no. And I left saying, I need to say yes to this. And that's where my journey here started. And it's been started as just a salesman here, working with those companies, trying to find office space, just like what you're in now.
Right.
And then about 1.5 years into my time there, I had the opportunity to step in as CEO. And it's been 4 years now since I had that advancement. And it's been a crazy roller coaster, but it's something I would not trade for the world.
Well, and it's evolving.
Mm-hmm.
The mission is clear. And we're going to get back to that mission in a second, but it is evolving, and the vision that was set, for there it's exciting because, you're part of the team and leading the team that is actually having that vision come through. What I wanted to talk about also with Geekdom, and it's something that I know you run into every single day, I run into from time to time in talking with young entrepreneurs, startup founders, is the process of a startup. Most people, think, I've got this idea, I'm going to have a company. Doesn't really work like that. There is a lesson, there is a path. Some of it is of hard knocks, but there is a path through that. And I'd really like to talk about some of the programming, because the empowerment that Geekdom does for founders and small businesses is, there's nothing else like it here in San Antonio, Texas, South Texas. And probably you'd have to look into Silicon Valley to find really something that is comparable to the quality of things that Geekdom is doing. But let's talk about ideation, incubation, and a little bit of acceleration. Can you talk a little bit about ideation and what that process looks like for that young entrepreneur?
Yeah. And I think the way that you're putting it is really great, talking about those 3 stages, because I feel like those words are sometimes misconstrued or used interchangeably between each other. And for me, ideation is where, obviously an idea is a part of that. But beyond that, it is kind of poking holes in that idea. And it's really just solidifying and identifying that that idea has legs, that there is potential market fit for what that idea is thinking of solving.
Right.
And it's exploring that to a point where you validate that there is something worth building. That to me is ideation. And again, I'm using my own parlances
Sure.
here. I'm sure that other people will have different approaches, but for me, ideation is validating that there is a need in the market for you to build or to make a product or to build a business out of.
Because let's be honest too. You see it a lot. I see it again quite a bit of, I've got this idea, and you see some ideas and you're like, wow, that's really cool.
Yep.
But actually, there is no path to commercialization.
100%.
You can't validate it. The things like product market fit, those sort of things, they don't exist. It's cool. It's an amazing invention or, idea for a service company, restaurant, that stuff.
Yep.
But there are such thing as, unfortunately, unprofitable ideas. I won't say bad ideas because I don't think there is, but there's unprofitable ideas.
Yeah.
And sometimes people find that out once they've gone too far because they skip that first step of ideation. At Geekdom, what are some of the programs that for somebody at that stage where they have an invention, they have an idea, what can they do to plug in at Geekdom so that way they can go and validate that idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for us, that is where we spend a lot of our time, is really just convincing somebody that you having an idea is the first step, but talking about it, getting validation behind it is really where the important pieces need to be played. And so for us, we, in the 12 years that we've been in existence, one of the things that we've been known to host are these programs called Startup Weekend or 3-Day Startup. There are these organizations that are nationally, if not globally run, that have these programs intended for tech startups to be able to go through the maturation process in a short period of time over a 3-day weekend and really validate that idea. And so basically think about it as a gauntlet to validate an idea. And although those programs work well for that intended purpose, they do not work as well for any other type of an idea. So if you have a food idea or you have a nonprofit idea, that type of a program may help to a certain extent, but it's not geared towards that. And then also those weekends are intended to be team building. So you meet other people, you bring in other resources, you do things. But one of the things that we've realized in the 12 years that we've been here is that a lot of people have these ideas and are a little bit too afraid to kind of take the first steps to do them. And so how can we empower them to do that? How can we empower them that your idea has validity for the sheer fact that you are thinking about it.
That's right.
But let's work together on trying to validate it as a whole on whether or not it's worth spending more time on. And so our programs director here, Matt Espinosa, ended up creating a new program that we call our Startup Boot Camps. And we launched it as a pilot late last year. And we have seen nothing but great turnout and success from that, to the point that even now we have backing from Bexar County to be able to assist us in hosting 10 of those this next year, or actually starting in June. Our very first one is going to be coming up. And we're going to host 10 of those and going out into the community and offering that service to them for free so that they can take those ideas and validate them over that weekend period. And then hopefully we walk out the other end, either with them saying, okay, it's not the idea, not the time, or this is the idea, this is the time, here's the pathway. And that's where those other things come in.
So is the boot camp more industry agnostic
100%.
than the startup weekends, which are tech focused?
Yep, this is very industry agnostic, and we pull in mentors kind of that can talk about the important pieces, which are at that ideation stage. You want to be able to make sure that there is a market fit for what it is that you're talking about, and really do some early exploration on, like, is the vehicle that you're thinking of, an app, a restaurant, a whatever, is that an appropriate fix for the problem that you're identifying? And spend that weekend doing that effort. And the way that we look at the startup boot camps, and going back to the ideation question, is going from idea to MVP. And so just having a minimal viable product that you can at least, even if you don't have it built out at that point, you at least know that that's what that next step is.
Right.
I can concisely talk about what the idea is to somebody, so that if, I get put on a podcast and somebody's like, what is it you do? I can talk about it within 30 seconds.
Right.
Or, I have a quick lean canvas business model written out with those questions, like who's your market and so on and so forth. So that's really what they walk away with.
So we usually talk about mission and then get into the inner workings. And I skipped that on purpose because let's talk a little bit about the mission, I would say big, hairy, audacious mission, which you guys are doing a phenomenal job here at Geekdom, and then how this plays into that mission. Can you talk a little bit about Geekdom's mission?
Yeah, happy to. And I'll start by giving real quick context, which is when Geekdom was founded in 2011, the need that it was being created to solve were really three things. Where it was pointed out in this very dramatic, now infamous email that was sent to Graham at the time. Graham was chair of Rackspace for a while, CEO even at points. Rackspace had acquired this company. As a part of that acquisition, the three co-founders were required to move here. One of them fought tooth and nail not to move and become a part of Rackspace, and sent this email to Graham, basically outlining exactly why he's choosing not to move to San Antonio. And that became this rallying call for Graham, and which led to what we're now sitting in today, which is the three things that gentleman pointed out were that San Antonio does not have an urban core at that time. This is a 2008, 2009 timeframe.
That's right.
That was, exciting for him. There was no developer scene. So if he wanted to go and find other developers to talk to, he didn't really have a community of developers to find. And then lastly, there was no startup scene. And so with the startup that they were a part of, that was being asked to come to be a part of Rackspace, he wanted to be around other people like that. And he's looking at San Antonio and he wasn't seeing that. And he aptly pointed it out to Graham, and Graham said, okay, what can we do to help solve these problems? And so Geekdom was one of the solutions that came out of that, really with the idea that we would be the place to help birth a startup scene. And the real first rallying cry that Geekdom walked out with was to be the place where startups are born. And I think that still holds true today. And the practice in which, I'm a big subscriber to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle.
Yep.
And so for me, if the why is to create a startup scene, and really that rallying cry is that we are going to be the place where startups are born, that's something I can get behind. But then it's, how do we do that, right? And at that time, the how, I think, was a little bit new. It was a new concept. You know,
Sure.
you rewind the clock again back to that 2010, 2011, when this idea was being really created. Co-working was the places where those ideas were really being formed, where you saw these startups really coming from, and where you saw that collaboration and things that led to success. And so that was really the business model that Geekdom started with, was we're going to create a place, we're going to invite people, and we're going to inject a culture of collaboration into it. And then those are the recipes which will hopefully birth those startups that we're hoping to do. And I think in reflection, it was successful,
Sure.
you know, in a lot of ways, that we saw a lot of positive things come from it. Flash forward, 2017, I joined the team. 2018 timeframe. One of the things that you're realizing is like, yeah, that works for a certain group of individuals that have the audacity to take that leap. But there's some that need a little bit more handholding. There's
Right.
people that need to know that there are other resources and that there are other programs out there. And so that's where, when I started diving into being excited about this environment, I started doing reading. I read Brad Fell's Startup Communities and how to build a startup ecosystem. And one of the things I realized was like, their programming is a missing piece that we had here. And our team was already starting to solve that. We had created the pre-accelerator, and we created the community fund at the time. And I could talk about those at greater detail, but those were the only programs we really had outside of running those startup weekends. But there was not a clear path. So if you walked in with an idea, where do you go? That was really where my approach had come when I stepped in as CEO, is that's what we need to do. And so coming out, into 2020, leading into the pandemic, we had this new mission that we were starting to formulate, which was building San Antonio one startup at a time.
Right.
And so that's now what our mission is, because to me, that holds the why very succinctly in
Absolutely.
there, that we're trying to change San Antonio for a place for startups. And then it was also setting that big, audacious, hairy goal. What are we aiming for? And for us, it was to build the next 500 startups, with 75% of them calling San Antonio home. And how we do that is we empower entrepreneurs to cultivate, shape, and grow their ideas into viable businesses through our programming and our community, which our community is such an important piece to that.
No, I mean, that's great. And that goal that you had of 500, how are you doing towards that goal?
So the goal for 500 is something that needs to be adjusted for the positive.
I was going to say.
And as you and I sit here talk, we launched that mission in 2021.
Yep.
And we're now halfway through 2023, and we're sitting at 190 startups. And not only 190 startups that we're helping through this process, but 121 of those are women or minority led.
Which is fantastic.
Which is amazing. And that's one of the things that I'm so proud of now, looking at the demographics and the people who are interested in creating something new. It's more reflective of the city that we live in, and I'm super excited about it.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're going to be adjusting that because you're
have to.
Exponential growth. You're in that range to where that number is going to be way too small for you. But again, it's interesting because even Geekdom itself, the journey you just described, is like you hear about most, found startups, right? They have a vision. Is there a market fit? Is there a need? What's the problem you're solving? And, I'm sure you run into this too. Some people think, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to make millions. And the reality is it's a long, hard road with pivots, going down a path and going, oh, there's a dead end right there. Let me reverse this thing back and go. Some people don't make it, those sort of things. But the testament to what you and the team have done here is fantastic. And it's just growing. I mean, from you guys now with Startup Week, great success last year. I know will be an amazing success this year. Startup Days, I guess, is what they're more every single month. The culture and the vibe of having a startup community, this is the epicenter. So again, it's well done. That's why we're here. We wanted to be closer to the epicenter on this. Let's talk a little bit about the community fund, because you did bring that up, because education and programming is important, because we can empower founders and small business owners to make sure that they are, armed with the knowledge they need, because that knowledge alone is priceless. People don't realize that sometimes. Don't take that right because it's a dead end and you've learned it, versus, well, I'm going to take that right. You learn the dead end. Now you got the knowledge, but you paid a pretty price for it. So we've talked about that, but the community fund is the second piece there, which is the money it does take to actually get? What was the vision behind the community fund, and talk a little bit more about how somebody can engage in the community fund?
Well, I'll start by, this is a common theme with me. Context is one of my top strengths. So I'll give you some real quick background.
I like that you use your strength finders there, right there too.
So in around 2012, there was an entity created called the Geekdom Fund.
Yes.
And the idea behind the Geekdom Fund was that it would start injecting these relatively small $25,000 investments into companies at this very early stage to help them get over those early stage hurdles, validate that idea, get that product out to market, or build the product in general. That's kind of why it was created. And they had such great success at such an early stage with some of those early companies that were coming from the Geekdom community that fund scaled. And in order to continue to fund those ideas as they leveled up to seed, to Series A, and so on and so forth, that fund had to grow to be able to continue to fund those things. And in its growth, there was this gap that had left, which was, how do these early stage startups get that really small injection of capital that they need to get past those early hurdles? And so in around 2018, our leadership at the time was like, we need to figure this out. And so the idea was, let's replicate really what the original success of the Geekdom Fund was, but with the intent of it, even if it does continue on with investments beyond that, it needs to stay in this sweet spot for for perpetuity as long as we can. And so that was the idea. That was a concept. And we ended up creating that community fund in 2018 with the idea that it would continue on staying in that $25,000. Actually, when it was first created, it was $10,000. We realized it was too small. Again, going through that market validation fit, right. $10,000 was not enough really to kind of make the impact that we were looking for. So we pivoted, made it $25,000, and it's in the form of a safe note also. So being, relatively founder friendly as opposed to investor friendly, because we're here again for the founders. And, using that early stage capital to help these companies get past these relatively large, some seeming insurmountable hurdles. And it's really helped out. And we've seen some great success stories from that.
No, I mean, as someone who has gone through the community fund process, someone who's watched the community fund, we've had a couple of community fund winners be on here with us on there. It is a great resource because people don't realize it does take money to make money.
Yeah.
And after, moving from the ideation phase and having to move, down the path, and we're going to talk about an incubation here in just a second, there is certain cash that's needed. I mean, Alfred has been with us with decks. Decks are not as intuitive for people that have never been a founder before. You learned that one the hard way.
Yeah.
Alfred's a great friend because he has just done amazing things with teaching me and some of my, business friends with this as well. But you need that. So just real quick, if anybody's, interested in that, how does someone be able to tap into that resource? Because it is such a great resource.
Yeah. So for the community fund, one of the things in its name is it's intended for this community. And so we ask that the people who do participate in it are members of Geekdom for at least 90 days before they pitch for that funding. So that's one requirement. Outside of that requirement, there's an application process. And through that application process, we're going to go through some of those validation points and see kind of what stage is this at? What are they going to do with the funding? Is it going to have a sizable impact not only to the company, but also to the community as a whole? Is it going to be a story that's going to be exciting for people to hear? Is that capital injection going to allow them to hire somebody? Like all those different impacts are really where we're looking with that. And then also all while it also being an investment,
right.
Is there a potential that this money will return? Is it going to allow them to scale to a point where we can then hopefully see some more of that funding coming back so that we can continue this work?
Which, I never thought about that till right now. I mean, another lesson that startup new founders find out is, there's the operational part, which is a lesson in itself. There's the corporate governance part, which is for another day and another topic on what does it mean to run my board and to have communication to my shareholders. And then there's the fundraising part. I didn't realize till right now that those second and third parts, actually someone can get a really good, easy experience with just understanding what the community fund is. Because it's corporate governance. Are you set up in the right type of structure you could receive it? What is a safe note? What does that mean, to have someone that's a safe note? Or you get to learn the corporate governance and the financing, fundraising part at the same time.
Yep.
So no, I think it's a great experience for those that are interested in that. Highly recommend it, even if you don't think you're ready, because the process of going through that application, of making a pitch, the feedback you guys give is, I mean, it's super valuable. And people don't realize that. You don't have to pay, and you get literally the rubric back with feedback on how your pitch was and what this idea is. It's a great, great tool.
Well, and just to add to that too, one of the things that we've seen over these years is that I think maybe outside of 2 instances, has somebody pitch for just once, and then won.
Right.
Most of the time, they're coming back a couple times. They're learning those lessons. They're getting that feedback. The questions that the judging panel asks in that room are essential, for them to learn. Like, oh, I might have missed this. There's an opportunity there. So yeah, that's a key piece to it, is really the learning, because we'll have some people, I'd say a lot of them, come in and start pitching for that money a little bit before they're ready for it. And we want them to experience what it's like to be in that room, because I think what's the average? 100 no's before you get 1 yes.
Right.
When it comes to fundraising. And so let's get that learning lesson out in a comfortable, safe environment for you, and giving you that feedback, so that when you really are going for fundraising, if that's the route you're going to go with, this is your first education in.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's a great community resource. And again, being a part of this community, I mean, it is cheap to become part of this community, which is, a testament again to the mission of what you guys are doing. So that resources, all those other resources are super valuable. Let me keep progressing here.
Yeah.
So somebody that's got that idea, they have it validated through, the ideation programming that's here. But then we come into this of, well, I hear about incubators and I hear about accelerators here in San Antonio. Can you talk a little bit about the incubator here at Geekdom?
Yeah. So the way that I break it down, again, it's just my opinion, is I break it down through these different stages of, you got an idea, then you got to create a product. Okay. And then from that product, then you have to take it to market. And for me, incubation is taking an idea and creating a product out of it. And through that, you're learning some essential business pieces that you need. So you're learning about financing, you're learning about market, product fit. You're learning about, how to talk about your business, creating your first pitch decks. Those types of things are really what's happening in the incubation stage for us through our programmatic journey. I think it's very important. And so when I try to succinctly say to somebody, like, why should I be going to the incubator? It's because you have this idea, but yet you don't have anything to start selling. And we want to get it to a point where you have something that if you did decide to turn on the switch tomorrow, you can start selling that. If it's a physical product, if it's an application or something on those lines. Even if you're still not ready out that tail end of it to have that product ready, at least now you understand the foundations in which you have to set it up on. So, what banking, institution you should use. Should you be an LLC, a C Corp, all those things, and understanding the pit holes and choosing which direction you go. That's ultimately the education that one walks out with the incubator, while ideally at that point you have a team as well. And so you're creating good team dynamics.
Well, and for this too, and I'm sure y'all run into this, I do as well, for those at that stage, because the legal needs start to come in, formations, and we've talked a little bit about LLCs and C Corps when you need those. Intellectual property protections, which is another major mistake that I see, where, multiple founders and who owns the IP becomes a question. So they start to move into that stage on there. But one of I think a mistake of a new founder is, I have a business degree, or I've watched enough TikToks that I got this.
I watched Shark Tank. I know what I'm doing.
Yes. Oh, I've heard lots of people tell me the Shark Tank. But the reality is the context, as you said, really matters. And the incubator, a startup is not like a typical, I'm going to buy a franchise, or even if I'm going to set up a lemonade stand, right? This is something that has a path, there's a journey, and the context of the hurdles and challenges for that industry. Some of these I know in our community, industry specific, or for just in general, are invaluable. Because for those that have gone down that right path, hit the dead end, had to turn around, that lesson gets taught. You don't have to do that. And you're not going to get that in a TikTok in 30 seconds.
100%, yeah.
I still can't figure out how to use the TikToks to talk about the law. It's too complicated.
We'll get you there.
Talk about the types of incubator program, like incubator-ish, I guess. I know you do have an incubator, but there's some other programs that are very much like that. What are the other opportunities here for somebody if they're ready for that next step?
So we also have workshops, which I know you participated in. And for us, those are those little bites that an individual who may not have even gone through that ideation stage or is still kind of contemplating it, can digest. And then really for us, it is a pathway into our programmatic journey, these workshops. So you allow a person to kind of opt in with a specific topic or subject that they want to focus on. So one of the ones we did earlier this week was around marketing. So you got to be able to talk about branding, who you are, why it matters to people, and speak in the language that the market wants to hear. The quicker you learn that, the better suited you're going to be. The legal stuff that you bring to the table, that is such an essential piece that that these companies need to have in order to really set themselves up for success. And so for us, we have those workshops. We also have a mentorship pool that we leverage to be able to offer to anybody really in the community, as long as they're members, to be able to set up time with those individuals, with those mentors, and understand and get certain questions asked at a more one-to-one basis. So those two programs, the workshops and the mentorship, and then also we have an entrepreneur in residence here who's kind of been there, done that, scaled a business from 2018, just him and a couple buddies, to I think it was a 9-figure sale a year or two ago. So, seeing that journey in such a short period of time and having him be able to offer that insight, those three programs are kind of for us, those ancillary things that even if you are in the incubator or not, or are in that incubation acceleration stage, those are still applicable. And there's still things that you can learn, even as just a general co-working member of this space, you can still go and participate in those.
Well, and again, some of these, the problems are universal, right? I mean, marketing. I mean, I was just talking to, a trademark attorney that we use, and she has to coach people like, hey, all your social media handles need to match. And Tejas, who does all this, is probably laughing because she had to do that because I messed it up. But those are the things you just don't. I mean, again, there's just so much, and as a founder and an entrepreneur, you're doing the coding, you're doing the strategy.
Got a lot of hats on.
You take out the garbage, all ththese things. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's inconsistent. I mean, the tools and the resources here are just invaluable. So it's great. The workshops, you guys continue to expand the workshops. Thank you. As I come in with my ideas about how we can empower people with more knowledge about legal hurdles they'll do, you guys have just been fantastic to be like, okay, let's go out there and talk.
Well, I'll add one thing too. So, those programs are specifically intended for those purposes, which is great to hear the feedback that you're giving. But one thing that I found very difficult to try to explain to people, but I think is one of the most essential pieces to the success of startups that do participate in the Geekdom environment, is our community. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to quantify that there are people outside of this office that you and I are sitting in right now who are willing to talk to you about any subject.
That's right.
And one of the things I love is whenever I talk to somebody new and they're like, is this a place I should be? And my answer is always like, obviously, yes. But the reason for that is not only because they're those people that you can learn from, but each new person we add has their own unique experiences and their own unique expertise that they can bring to the table, which means that now we've added a new little spice to the mix. And the next person that then runs into that individual is going to learn something that they've experienced. And then it's such an impactful thing, but the hardest thing to quantify. It is.
And you're right. I mean, we walk through the halls and run into people that have been on here on this, podcast with us, marketing people, business people, people, even we try to make sure that we've got the ability so people can, call and have 15, 20 minutes talk to us about things that they're going through, because that's just the kind of, community this is. Let me keep progressing down onto this more to the accelerator, which I know, or I'm pretty sure you guys don't actually run your own accelerators, but there are some partnerships and some resources within the community for that stage that you guys have as well.
Yeah. So we have a pre-accelerator.
Right.
And our idea of a pre-accelerator, again, kind of carrying on that motif of ideate, go to product. For us, walking out of the pre-accelerator, you should be walking out with a go-to-market plan. Now, that go-to-market plan changes depending on what industry you're in, depending on what your goals are as far as fundraising and scaling and those types of things. But we want a person to be able to walk out with a solid pitch. We want somebody to be able to walk out with an idea of, am I raising funds to continue this before I go out to the market? Am I selling it? And if so, how am I talking about what I'm selling to the market in a very, very impactful way that they can start raising revenue really quickly? That's really what our goals are with the pre-accelerator. But it's also for for what we're trying to accomplish, acting as a clearinghouse. And what I mean by that is you walk in there, you participate in a program like that, or even if you don't participate in that program, but you've kind of gone through the incubation, you maybe have received the community fund, but the industry that you're in or the resources that you require have an accelerated need. And so then we find partners. So we find partners like Velocity Texas. If you have a life science, biomed tech type of a company, let's send you over there because they are the environment where you need to take that to the next level. They have funding for those types of things. They have deeper mentors when it comes to those types of subjects. And so creating those types of partnerships within the San Antonio ecosystem are essential for that acceleration piece. Right. And the way that I define acceleration outside of how, I just said earlier, which is like the go-to-market plan, it is really, I want to scale at a much more rapid pace than my revenue currently will allow me to do. And that's when acceleration, I think, is very important and essential, and finding the right partners for that are. And so Velocity, Capital Factory, Generator with their cybersecurity accelerator here, all those things are really where we then plug people in for next resources.
Which the way you just described it is great. And we're going to clip that and use that because it was beautifully said. I always said, look, if the time is ticking on how much cash you have, it's accelerator time.
You're seeing the end of that runway?
That's right. When you think you're about to fall off the cliff and not going to make it, it's accelerate or die. Is the way I look at those. I didn't even know about your pre-accelerator, which I think is great because, again, accelerator is that runway is about to fall off. If you got to pitch, and that's what accelerators can do, is improve the gaps that you have, so that way you are better positioned for that outside investment that's here in our community. And Velocity Texas and Generator, they're fantastic accelerators in our community. Last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the vision that you said at the very, 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 very beginning of the email, which I didn't know the email. It'd be great. I should get the email and frame it somewhere, but there might be some other parts of that email that need to be redacted. Talk about San Antonio in this area, because that's another thing. As I walk out my door, we've been here 2 weeks now, and I walk out my door. I don't know what was going on in the park across, but there was lots of activity. The line going out the barbecue, there's a bench so people can sit at Pinkerton's to go out, which I thought was that was awesome.
Yep.
But talk more about that vision, because you were so involved with this community.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thinking about that greater umbrella purpose, again, those 3 points that guy pointed out, one of those is that urban core. And so the urban core component of it is, how do we, or what role does Geekdom play, or, just in general, to change the urban core dynamics? And so we have a sister company that's been amazing, Western Urban, who has been in the commercial real estate development, action since around 2012, 2013. And so they've done some key or some key pieces to the local downtown environment. Some of those being the new Frost Tower that you can see with its beautiful, Jim Pershbach from Port always says it's got Bart Simpson hair, which if you look at it,
was like a crown. But now I'm going to think Bart Simpson the next time I see it.
Yeah. And so you got that, but then, Pinkerton's and that park right there was another development that they've done. And so they're really bringing this new thought to, if we want to have an urban core, what key pieces are there? Restaurants, there's, places for people to work. And now one of their major focuses is residential. And so as you and I, if we were to walk out of this room and turn that way, we would see the newest residential building that they're building, 300 Main. And that is a key piece. You got to have a live, work, play balance. And I feel like for San Antonio, tourism was the main reason to come downtown.
Right.
And now there is a different feel to it. You got City Tower active. We've got Frost Bank and all their employees active. We've got this building with so many different startups and new ideas coming out. So it's creating this really nice environment of people, and they're mixing in with the tourists, but now we're starting to get residents move down here. So to your point, you're going to start seeing a changing environment. And one of the things that I'm proud to say is, I think we all had a lot of question marks going into the pandemic. And now that we're kind of coming out, we're starting to see that although there was a beat, missed, I feel like the foundations held strong. And now we're starting to rebuild on them, and you're starting to see the activity increase.
Well, I would tell you, I was here a couple times, meetings. I have clients in the building and friends, of course. I came here a couple times during COVID, and it was a ghost town.
Yep.
Even last year, I was here, early last year, and there was some activity. But just coming into here, which is why we relocated down to here. I mean, there is an energy and an excitement down here that you and your team have, now been able to take to that next level, which is fantastic. So congratulations again. I think that, the seed that was planted in 2000, maybe that email, we should go all the way back to that.
Yep.
Within the next probably 18 to 24 months, I mean, people really, really are going to see that vision come to light. So.
Yeah, thank you. And one last thing I'll add too is I read that book Bradfeld wrote.
Yeah.
One of the things he said in there was it takes 20 years to build an effective startup ecosystem, right? And one of the things that I really wanted to make a point at was when we hit our 10-year mark, that 2021, coming out with that audacious goal of 500 startups this is that halfway mark.
Yep.
What is the next 10 years? That's really where this whole environment is going to, succeed or fail. And I think all the key ingredients are there. It's not just resting on Geekdom's shoulders like it was right when it first started. We have those partners like Velocity and others that are around that are helping lead that charge. Not only that, we have UTSA relocating a large component of their student body downtown. That's another key piece. And we've got businesses starting to show up as well. So for me, the ingredients are there. And I think to your point, next 18 to 24 months, you're going to see this really accelerate quite rapidly. So yeah, I think we've done the incubation.
Now you're in the accelerator. Yeah. You're outside the pre-accelerator too, man. Y'all are deep into the accelerator. Well, Charles, thank you again for joining us on here. We really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Wow. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We at the South Texas Business Lawyers are on a mission to educate and support and advise every small and medium-sized business and startup in South Texas. And this is the way that we get to share the stories about our community, which just is something that is bring us all great joy here at the South Texas Business Lawyers. If you've got a second, leave us a comment. Let us know if we're providing value. Like us, join us on Facebook, join us on social media. Again, we are out there providing free content for you so that way you can be proactive with your legal needs. We'll see you next episode.